I don't remember much, but one thing I do remember from university days as a student of organic chemistry is that so much of the created world is made up of combinations of just four elements: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. And my purpose this evening is a very simple one. It's to suggest to you that the world of mission is also made up of a combination of four elements. And as God stirs your heart by His Spirit to join Him in His mission in the world, to live into your vocation and to color it and flavor it with His mission, these four elements are the place to begin and also the place to end. This is the combo that is always relevant and always needed. And they find their origin in something that Jesus is and something that Jesus says: grace and truth and salt and light. Let's look firstly at something Jesus is. John 1:14 describes Jesus as being full of grace and truth. Now, if you scroll through your memory of Jesus in this gospel and watch Him relating to people, with Nicodemus, with the woman at the well, with the one with a disability trying to get down into the pool at Bethsaida. Beautiful verse: "Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone always goes down ahead of me." But not Jesus. Then with the disciples in the upper room washing their feet, at the cross with His mother, and then with Mary, the disciples, with Thomas after the resurrection: "Reach out your hand and put it into my side." With people, there's something in common here. Jesus is so full of grace. He is a specialist in kindness and respect and compassion. He takes time with people. He lingers with them. He loves them. But scroll down again through this gospel, not just watching Jesus with people, but listening to Jesus with ideas. I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you hold to my teaching, you really are my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I tell you the truth. I tell you the truth. I tell you the truth. 27 times, almost once for every chapter. And how does He describe the devil? Not holding to the truth, for there's no truth in him. How does He describe the Spirit? When I go, the Spirit of truth will come and guide you into all truth. Even philosopher Pilate's question, "What is truth?" is prompted by Jesus saying, "I came into this world to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Do you see it? Jesus is so full of truth as well. He is a specialist in deep, stubborn convictions about how the truth even exists, and then that the truth is wrapped up in Himself, actually. And to our ears today, wanting to celebrate tolerance, this appears harsh, as it leaves us looking around asking, where did all that grace go? So do you feel the tension? It's important to feel the tension in the very person of Jesus Himself. How can you be full of grace and full of truth at the same time? Well, He is. It's almost like this is the table of contents for the Gospel of John. You could refer to it as grace and truth, full of it. And yet followers of Jesus today, they find this difficult, don't we? We find it difficult to hold on to both of these at the same time. So we have Christians who elevate grace. We stumble our way through the truth stuff. We are a little embarrassed, a little bit uncertain, wishing it would just go away. And then we have Christians who elevate truth, mostly from their perches behind pulpits and on websites and streaming their way through social media. And they just cannot get themselves afflicted with grace or graciousness. Okay, hold that thought just for a moment, and we'll come back to it. There's two more elements. One pair finding their origin in something that Jesus is, and the second pair sourced in something Jesus says. And the verses Lynn read from Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus tells his followers, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world." And in a world without fridges and freezers, it appears that salt had simply one basic role. It was mixed into the fish and into the meat, and its purpose was to stop things going rotten. As if Jesus is saying to his followers, mix in, get involved at every level, in every way, because if you do not, the world around you has qualities inherent in it which will see it begin to decay. And I want you to be part of its redemption, not its rotting. And then in a world without switches and bulbs, light was prized. The rhythm of work and family light had to be linked to the sun. It's the only time you could see. And yet, if they had a feeble flame flickering away on its own, it could take the darkness away. And the point being that light and darkness cannot live together. They are different. So different that even a feeble flicker of light will banish the darkness. Nothing is more different than light is from dark. And it's as if Jesus is saying to his followers, be different. Come from outside with something distinctive. Even your little flicker will make a difference. But be different. Because the world around you has qualities inherent in it which will keep it a dark place, and you need to show the way. Hang on, Jesus. I don't understand. Give me time to catch up with you here. I am a little slow. You just told me to be the salt, to mix in. Now you want me to be the light, to be separate, and to not to mix in. You can't have it both ways. Do you see the tension? In the very words of Jesus himself. How can you be salt and light at the same time? And followers of Jesus today find this difficult. We find it difficult to hold on to both of these at the same time. And so we have Christians who prioritize being salt. Hey, God loves this world, and motivated by mercy and justice, they throw themselves into it. And then there are Christians who prioritize being light. Hey, this world is at war with God. It rejects God. And so motivated by holiness and righteousness, they are more guarded and they keep themselves separate. So where does this leave us? Both who Jesus is and what Jesus says leaves us with tension. There is a kind of a collision here, a contradiction here. It's a little bit simplistic, but let's try and draw out the implications of this tension by using some language from the world of economics. The first image is one of a graph. Tension is actually part of a deepening understanding of the gospel. It's all through the Bible. The dignity and depravity of human beings. Tension. The most important truths in the Bible actually come to us on a seesaw, where we have to keep the tension alive. And the graph is a wonderful tool to picture this tension and actually see what's going on. So firstly, we have a grace and truth graph. And there are two axes. There's a vertical axis, and it goes from empty to full, and it measures compassion, a kind of a grace graph. And then there's a horizontal graph that is the truth axis, going from empty to full and measuring conviction, if you like. And then you can simply create 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 describes people who are relatively empty of both grace and truth. This is the nominal nonsense, which is such a nuisance in the mission of God. Empty of compassion and empty of conviction, and yet still claiming to be Christian. In quadrant 2, we find people and strategies and approaches which are compassionate, but compromise on truth and conviction because grace rules. And then in quadrant 3, it reverses this because truth rules. And then quadrant 4, for the sake of this argument, this is where the people, the strategies, the initiatives remind us of Jesus himself, full of grace and truth. I work for an organization called Langham, and a couple of years ago, Langham launched a 1-volume South Asia Bible commentary. So, commentary on the whole Bible, Genesis to Revelation, written totally by South Asian scholars, with 100 contextual articles, and an absolutely amazing volume. And it was launched in New Delhi in India, and Barbie and I went along. It was a massive event at a cathedral within a stone's throw of the parliament buildings in Delhi and near the president's residence. And the vice president of India was invited, and he came as a special guest, a Muslim. The program was well underway, keeping to time, bearing witness to the Bible and to the Christ it reveals. There was plenty of truth going on. And then the call to prayer from the local mosque started. And as they can be, it was loud and intrusive. And the one leading the service stopped out of respect for the Vice President of India. And for a few moments, everyone just sat there hushed and quiet in the open air, listening to the mosque at a Christian celebration before finishing this service. There was plenty of grace going on as well. Now, the vice president was visibly moved. It was actually very noticeable. He was due to leave straight away, but he decided to stay. If I got it on right. In fact, not only did he stay, he asked for extra copies of the commentary. Now, that was a quadrant 4 moment, duplicated in all of your lives if you're open to it, where the response of that person leading the service was looking for full of truth and full of grace. Now, there's also a salt-light graph. Again, 2 axes, a vertical axis measuring involvement in the world from low salt content to high salt content. Then there's a horizontal axis from low light to high light, measuring the level of distinctiveness. So quadrant 1 is once again nominal nonsense, low involvement and low distinctiveness. Quadrant 2 describes those deeply involved in the world, but not so very distinctive as they do so. These people want to be relevant. It's their big concern. Quadrant 3 is once again the reverse. These are separate and different. They want it to be far from the world. And for the sake of this argument, Quadrant 4 identifies what Jesus had in mind in Matthew chapter 5. Long ago, it's a long time ago, but it's just such a simple, lovely illustration of this, and it works well. Our son Martin went to a birthday party when he was about 12. A group of 6 to 8 boys having a great time. And then one of these boys suggests watching a movie together as part of the party. I still remember the title, so I know the date and how old he was. But it was the movie Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. Now, instinctively, Martin is not too sure. So how will he respond? He could choose a quadrant 1 option and forget that he's a young follower of Jesus and not a factor and just get on with the party. Quadrant 2 would have him kind of go with the flow as well, stay with his friends. Relationships are important, keep them intact. Quadrant 3, the heavily distinctive. He could give his mom and dad a call, use the secret code, and we would come and get him. That would be a legitimate response. But at just 12 years of age, he made such a good decision. I've been praising him ever since, and he's still making good decisions. In his own little world, he exercised a little leadership, and he chose a quadrant 4 response. Nah, let's not watch a movie together. Let's go outside and play soccer together instead. And that's what they did. It's very simple, but do you see it? He stayed involved, but he was looking for a way to be involved in a distinctive way, and this strengthened him a little bit more for bigger challenges of the same kind that lay ahead. So there are the graphs, just a couple of observations. Wonderful Christian people occupy quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. Most people live there. But if your hearts are turned towards being effective in the mission of God on the earth, then quadrant 4 operates as a magnet on your heart. A week like this, in this church, is really about herding people into quadrant 4. Now, in both the grace, truth, and the salt, light graphs, the quadrants actually cover similar territory. Quadrant 2 is similar in both. Quadrant 3 is similar in both. In fact, we could add words just to give them some description. Quadrant 1 is kind of a nominal sort of approach. Quadrant 2 is where relevance is such a big deal. Quadrant 3 is separation, and then my favorite word. Quadrant 4 is where we look to be intriguing with our lives. Intriguing. So people who are gracie tend to be salty. And people who are truthy tend to be lighty. I had a strong quadrant 3 upbringing. Truthy is where it was. Now here's a key thing to understand. But the response is not what many do with a truthy upbringing, and that is swing to the other extreme and become a gracie, salty person instead. That is an overreaction. It is about, rather, adding the gracie, salty dimension, not moving from quadrant 3 to quadrant 2 in a terrible overreaction, but adding gracie, salty, and getting up into quadrant 4. And in many ways, that's a lot of my adult life, trying to do that. Building on my child, and not reacting to it, which is so easy to do, but building on it and trying to add these other strengths. A second word from economics is the word forecast. It's a future-looking word or a vision word. And I just simply want to state the obvious here. There is a space to occupy with your life, the life of this church. And that is the quadrant 4. Regardless of your vocation and calling, regardless of your age and stage, always there is a quadrant to occupy. Grace and truth. In all that we are, in all that we do, we aim at being celebrated for our kindness, headlined for our humility, and gracious, always gracious with people. And yet doing so under deep conviction and standing up and standing out for the truth. Salt and light. In all that we are, in all that we do, we aim to be involved at every level, in every pocket of society, having a compassion which so powered Jesus, being the servant which so identified Jesus, and yet doing it all with a difference, being distinctive, being countercultural, so opposite, so attractive that people are drawn to the Jesus living in us, like moths are drawn to the light. Recently, a book came out titled The Faith of Christopher Hitchens. I saw it at Coorong today. On sale tomorrow, I'm sure. It is the story of how a tough atheist, Christopher Hitchens, who made a career of destroying Christianity, may have actually come close to Christ at the end, brought on as cancer approached. And what did he find persuasive? What softened him? A sentence leaps out on page 82. Real believers surprised him. Intrigue. Real believers surprised him with a young girl from memory of about 8 leading the way. They got close enough to be his friend, that's quadrant 2, but then they lived gospel lives and spoke gospel words, that's quadrant 3, and these lives and these words intrigued him and drew him closer to God. That is quadrant 4. Then there needs to be an audit. If that's the forecast, if that's the projection, we need to take stock. We need to audit who we are and what we are doing as individuals, as families, as churches, as ministries. We need to sit down with everything that's happening in our lives, look at these graphs, and plot it accurately on the graph. Where will we place them? In which quadrant will this ministry be found? How can they be drawn more fully into quadrant 4? So a graph, a forecast, an audit, and then assets and liabilities. As we conduct this audit and press our ministries into quadrant 4, we will discover there to be assets and liabilities. What are we doing well by God's grace, and where are we not getting it right? We need to identify the quadrant 4 ministries and the quadrant 4 people, and we need to heap support onto them. We need to celebrate them. We need to give these people the microphone. We need to encourage these people to be mentors. We need to provide these people with resources. We need to pray for them and open doors for them and do all we can to help them be effective, and then watch their quadrant 4 influence grow and spread. If my children were here tonight, they would be giggling, because Barbie and I raised our children on these graphs. We wanted this way of thinking and this way of living to be an asset they have as they walk into life and their future callings, and as they join God in His mission in the world. A final word to an older evangelist and a newer sociologist. D.L. Moody said, "The place for the boat is in the sea, but God help the boat if the sea gets into it." And in To Change the World, James Davison Hunter calls local churches not to be only defensive against the world, just the light. Not to be only relevant to the world, that's so shallow, just salt. No. It's about having a faithful presence within the world. Faithful to God, yet present in the world. That's the answer. When I was at university, there was a book doing the rounds that shaped our lives. It was called Give Up Your Small Ambitions. And in many ways, wherever we are in our vocations, our sense of God's call on our lives, in many ways that's the challenge that I have for you tonight. We started with a question: what is your role in mission? My answer is give up your small ambitions. Stick with your vocation, stick with your calling, but leave all that other ambition stuff and have an ambition to seep your life and your calling with grace and truth and salt and light. And look at the big things God will do in you and through you for the sake of Jesus. God bless you.